Namaskar. Do you think that the names that we bear have some kind of a bearing on our personality? In that sense, if you change your name, then will your personality also change along with your name? Or do you think that names have absolutely nothing to do with our lives? In that sense, why do many writers often adopt pseudonyms for their works of art? For example, Eric Arthur Blair wrote under the famous nom de plume George Orwell, and Charles Dodgson wrote under the famous pen name Lewis Carroll. Well, the world can be divided into two groups. Those who believe that names have some kind of a meaning and those who don't. No matter which side you are on, the six literary works that we will discuss today will both prove you correct and prove you wrong. The first work that we will discuss is the source of the famous line, "What's in a name?" Now, I know that you know that it was Shakespeare who gave us this famous line, but do you know which character in which play of Shakespeare used these lines and in what context? If you don't, then today is your lucky day. It was the play Romeo and Juliet. Now imagine Juliet standing in her balcony, lost in the thought of Romeo, whom she met that very evening in a party. Unbeknownst to her, under the balcony, Romeo is staring at Juliet and is eavesdropping her conversation with herself. At that time, Juliet comes to terms with the fact that Romeo actually belongs to the clan of Montague, a clan which has had an age-old enmity with her clan, the Capulets. And Juliet says, "What's Montague? It is nor hand, nor foot, nor arm, nor face, nor any other part belonging to a man. Oh, be some other name. What's in a name? That which we call a rose, by any other name will smell as sweet. So Romeo would, were he not Romeo called, retain that dear perfection which he owes without that title." In these lines, Juliet transgresses the boundaries of her clan in order to fall in love with a person who might be the enemy of her clan. Just like a rose, if you call it by the name of Golapo in Odia, will smell as sweet. Similarly, Romeo is also independent of his name. He will be the same sweet persona no matter which name you call him by. Is that getting too serious? Well, the next work that we will discuss is actually subtitled as a trivial comedy for serious people. It's the famous play titled The Importance of Being Earnest by the Irish author Oscar Wilde, a famous flamboyant 19th century aesthete. In this play, we meet two ladies, Gwendolen and Cecily, who have fallen in love with the name Ernest Worthing. Wait, there is no character called Ernest Worthing in the play. In fact, Cecily has fallen in love with her imaginary lover so much that she fights with, argues, and writes letters to and from Mr. Ernest Worthing, an imaginary person, addressed to herself. No amount of coaxing would convince these ladies to do otherwise. That's why the two protagonists of this novel actually changed their name to Ernest in order to win their love. Unlike Juliet, who fell in love with a person irrespective of his name, these two ladies fell in love with a name irrespective of the person who takes that name. On the surface level, we might think that Gwendolen and Cecily are doing totally opposite of what Juliet did, but we might realize that in both cases, the name and the personalities were absolutely independent of each other and were interchangeable. The next work that we would discuss will challenge this hypothesis. It is the novel titled The Namesake by Jhumpa Lahiri. In this novel, we meet a person called Gogol. The son of a Bengali couple settled down in America. Gogol is actually named after the Russian author Nikolai Gogol because by a strange coincidence, our Gogol's father was actually saved from a train accident by reading a story by the Russian author Nikolai Gogol. See, stories can save lives. But Gogol doesn't like his name. Growing up in America, he's teased for his name for its incongruity. He comes to know about the life of that historical author Gogol and feels depressed. Gogol is so depressed that he actually changes his name to Nikhil Ganguly in order to fit in his society. Now see, a name is not just a hollow word. It's a marker of one's identity. One can know one's gender, one's religion, one's country of origin just by knowing or hearing one's name. Gogol's decision to change his name to Nikhil Ganguly was in fact prompted by his desire to be acceptable. The fourth item in our list is actually a poem titled The Unknown Citizen by W.H. Auden. This poem is written in form of an obituary or a condolence message that is commissioned by the state for a person who is not named but identified with an alphanumeric code JS/07M378. In this poem, which is written by a sophisticated scribe or auto-generated by a machine, we get to know that the unknown citizen was an unremarkable man who followed all the rules of the state, had the perfect number of children, never participated in any protest, and had also got all the necessary household items by an installment plan. In fact, all this information was gathered by some statistical bureau. Was he happy? Was he sad? The question is absurd. Had anything been wrong, we should certainly have heard. These are the last lines of this poem. This poem documents the loss of individuality of a man in the modern age just by giving the alphanumeric code instead of a name. How would you like in case somebody calls you by your roll number or by any such random number that you are assigned, not by the name your parents have given you? I don't know what W.H. Auden would have written had he been alive today. The fifth literary work is actually a very, very interesting poem written by the American humorist Shel Silverstein and sung by Johnny Cash. In this poem, titled A Boy Named Sue, we come to know about the travails of a person named Sue and the troubles he had with his name. His father had actually named him Sue and abandoned him. Throughout his life, he goes from town to hide his shame, which was his name. He wanted to meet his father and punish him for the meanest thing that he ever did, that was to name him Sue. And eventually the day comes when he meets his father in a pub. He is angry. He is about to take revenge. This is the day he was waiting for. He fights his father and is almost about to kill him when his father says, "Wait. The world is rough. And in order to make it, you have got to be tough." His father had given him the name Sue so that he would grow to be a courageous and fearless man, and ultimately he became a courageous and fearless man. Sue actually became how his father imagined him to be just by giving him that random but yet forcible name. Okay, now let's come to the sixth and final work in our list. It actually shares its border with linguistics and philosophy, but I call it a work of literature for the sheer amount of influence it has had on literary studies. It is actually an essay titled The Nature of the Linguistic Sign by the Swiss scholar Ferdinand de Saussure from a book edited by his students Charles Bailey and Albert Shehai. In this essay, Saussure makes an interesting claim. He says that any language, let's say Odia, Hindi or English, could be compared to a tall structure. Let's call it a building. And as a building is made of bricks, so is language made of words, and each word has two components, a naming part and the meaning part. The name is the sound of the word. For example, lizard is the sound, and the meaning is the idea it generates in my mind of this brown reptile-like thing crawling up my ceiling. Okay, so that's fine. Every word has two components. What's new? The next thing that Saussure says will definitely blow your mind. He says that there is absolutely no relationship between the naming part and the meaning part. Okay, now lizard in Odia is called a jhitipiti. Now if you see, the sound lizard has absolutely nothing to do with the word, with the sound of jhitipiti. In case there was any relationship between the name jhitipiti and the meaning of this word, then perhaps there would have been only one language in the world or similar languages in the world. Okay, so in that sense, no word has any inherent meaning in itself. They are meaningless names which a particular linguistic community decides to bestow with a certain meaning. And in case tomorrow, let's say all the speaker of English language decide to call a lizard by the name of rhinoceros, then I may very well be making a sentence like, yesterday I was sleeping peacefully in my room while 4 rhinoceroses were crawling upside down on my ceiling. Now I'm totally confused whether names have any meaning or not. Oh my god, I think some lizards have taken my joke too seriously and they are about to protest. You know what, I'll take care of them and meet you later. Dhanyavad.